So we didn't want to be late.
That's why I think it's good.
It's always, you gotta watch this guy. Yeah, on the pens.
Good afternoon. My name is Gregory Sumas, Manhattan Democratic Commissioner and President of the Board of Elections for the year 2014. With the commissioners beginning to my left, state their presence for the records.
Michael Randino, the Bronx County Republican Commission. Simon Schmidt, Kings Republican.
Frederick Humane, Manhattan Republican.
Michael Michelle, Queens Republican.
Mr. Rajo?
Jose Rajo, Queens Democrat.
Thank you. Senior staff?
John Santos, the Executive Director.
Nina Crispino, Director of Personnel.
Kenneth Felton, Council to Commissioners.
Stephen Richmond, General Counsel.
Thank you. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from June 3rd, 2014. Have the commissioners seen them? Anybody want to move them in? Anybody want to second it? All in favor? Any abstain or? 6-0. Okay, then it's approved. Second on the agenda is Michael J. Ryan. Oh, he's not here. The third item on the agenda, Stephen H. Richmond.
Thank you, Commissioners. In front of you, you have a package relating to the independent nominating petition rules for the November 4th general election and 2 draft calendars. One for the independent nominating petition for federal office in accordance with Judge Sharp's decision. The second for the petition filing for state and local offices in accordance with the election law. With respect to the rules, there are no changes with respect to the rules that you adopted for the designating petition process, and it contains the same conforming rules that we adopted this year to make the language clear with respect to cover sheets requiring to be containing accurate and correct information. With respect to the calendars, the 2 items for you is to set the dates of the hearings. We're recommending that for the federal office petitions, it's Tuesday, August 26th at 1:30 prior to your regular meeting. And then for the regular petitions, for the state and local office, we're suggesting that for the week of Labor Day, you convene that week at Thursday, September 4th at 1:30 p.m. Since the last day to file the objections is that prior Thursday, we wanted to give the borough staff at least the Labor Day weekend and a couple of days into next week to work. And I would suggest that in the Tuesday meeting, we meet on Thursday night.
Is there a way we could do it that Tuesday, or is it going to screw up the judicial proceedings, et cetera? Supposing we...
You mean wait, the following Tuesday is the
Yeah.
primary. We're not meeting on the 9th. So the question is either cut 2 days off of the boroughs and have risks that we won't be ready to do it on the
No, we
2nd,
shouldn't do that.
or do it that week of Labor Day, we'd be on the Thursday instead of the Tuesday, for your whole meeting if you want. But commissioners, in the past, we've done that normally to meet on the Thursday before the primary, so that we can complete the work, allow for timely judicial review, as Commissioner Humane noted, and also allow us to run the primary on the following Tuesday. So commissioners are happy to respond to any questions, but that's my recommendation. I ask that you adopt these since the first day to circulate petitions for the federal office is next Tuesday. Independent nominating petitions.
Mr. Humane.
Yeah. Can we attach the state form of petition to our rules for this purpose?
The reason we did not do that is we intend to see if we're making the form available, there was a claim filed to make it available since it goes to the voters in all the covered languages. So that's why we refer it to the state board, because then you can bring litigation against them. It is on the state board website as to the format. So that's the reason, that's the compromise we adopted. And if you look, Commissioner, on the last page of the actual rules, we made a reference that was on page, the last page, which is the page 22, for the form of an independent nominating petition, see section 6-140 of the New York State election law. We did that because, Commissioners, when we used to include the sample petitions, we then had an application made to us to translate it to all the covered languages, and I believe it would be covered since this is an item that's presented to the vote. So we figured let them sue the state, because the state has to translate the election law.
you know, but if they do it the way they've been doing it, it's no help.
But this, I mean, I agree, but this was a litigation avoidance thing.
I understand, it's just, it's not the same form, the language in the petition part is not identical with the regular party one, so I was just thinking that this would avoid some additional ambiguity and confusion for some of the potential candidates.
It goes further than that. The current state law form is contrary to federal court order. However, the state board doesn't have the authority to change until the statutes change. The Assembly passed a cleanup bill last week. We're hoping that the Senate does it the same, but that has created even greater confusion. Because if you use the statutory formula, you actually claim that you're a resident of the eligible to vote for the office, which the federal court has ruled, the Second Circuit has ruled is unconstitutional. So yeah, this is a complicated area.
Anybody have a motion?
Yeah, I move we adopt the rules as submitted to us.
Anybody want to second that?
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed or abstained? Motion carries.
The calendars?
Excuse me?
I
Commissioner
move we
May?
adopt the suggested calendar dates submitted to us.
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed or abstained? Motion carries. Thank you.
Could I add one point of personal privilege to introduce the two new law students in terms of you?
Yeah, that's Mr. Ryan Boyce with
Okay.
his speech.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. Ryan, thank you for joining us.
Yes, actually, it will be myself and Mr. Richmond boring you with those. In any event, on June 10th, the executive staff, consisting of myself, Dawn Sandow, Pamela Perkins, as well as our legal counsel and deputy legal counsel, and it was by facial recognition, Commissioner Andino, Commissioner Shimon, Commissioner Castorina, Commissioner Rostella, and Commissioner Dent that accompanied, we all went to Albany, and we met with various legislators, including representatives from the governor's office, and hosted a reception, a little luncheon reception, to discuss our legislative agenda, which is included in this rather voluminous document that was previously voted on and approved by the commissioners. With respect to some developments, I believe Mr. Richmond reported to us and has some further detail on some of the action that was taken at this point only by the State Assembly, is that correct?
Correct.
But if you could report on that, and then we'll be concluded with that agenda item.
In terms of bills passed by the Assembly, it's the cleanup bill with respect to the independent nominating petitions. They've also passed a bill that codifies the Court of Appeals decision in Barron versus the City Board of Elections, which says that in the event of a vacancy in an office in an even-numbered year for which a special election is not called, the office will only appear once on the ballot. The Assembly also passed a bill that would restore rotation to the primary ballot, or paper ballots, which would be effective immediately upon its enactment. So the good news is it won't affect Tuesday's primary, but if it passes the Senate, signed by the governor, it could affect us for September. And lastly, proposal number 14-1, the bill to clarify the requirements that cover sheets contain accurate and correct information, has been introduced by Assemblyman Cusick through the Rules Committee, and it's my understanding it will be voted on by the Assembly either later today or tomorrow, and we're hoping that we may get action before the end of the session, even on that day as well.
Commissioner May?
Yeah. Is there a way that in case we're asked if the bill requiring rotation is somehow passed by the Senate, and we're asked by somebody else who might have a say in that, as to how much it's going to cost, could we prepare some sort of calculation so that we would be able to provide that? Because my thinking is it would be very expensive.
I've asked Mr. Nordis already and Mr. Sally to begin work on that in anticipation that the executive chamber solicits comments. I would also believe that the Office of Management and Budget and the Mayor's Office may be concerned upon the impact as well.
Well, the system would have to be modified and then approved, and I don't see that happening in the amount of time for the September primary.
They don't care about practicality, they care about legislation, there's a difference.
The one thing I can say is that as of this morning, there is still no same as in the Senate, but the bill is at the Senate. So whether they decide to take up the Assembly bill itself, we'll have to see. As I said, it was adopted, I believe, with only one dissenting vote in the Senate. And we'll keep you informed as, the session should end, hopefully, it's predicting either Thursday night or Friday morning, so we'll know if anything else passes.
Anything else?
I have a personnel item for executive session, and I know that Commissioner Dent, on her arrival, will have.
So the answer is no.
On the main agenda?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have an addition to the agenda.
Terrific, you're up.
Okay.
Mr. Rice finished.
Thank you. A few weeks ago, the ballot committee met, and we were making a recommendation to the full board that the Board of Elections move forward in acquiring a ballot on demand system and asking that executive management get back to us on which system would be better for us. And that's my motion.
Second motion.
Alex,
I just I wanted to come up and make a
come
comment.
on up. What, all of a sudden you shy?
Hi, Alex Camarda, Citizens Union. I just wanted to comment on the legislative item that was on the agenda. It's actually, we've been lobbying on a couple bills, none of which I think are going to actually pass this session, but I just wanted to highlight two of them because I think they'll be important down the road. One of which is ballot design. We've long supported the Kavanaugh bill that twice passed the Assembly, that I believe the board supports as well. It passed the Assembly this session also. We've also worked with Senator Golden's office that put forth a ballot design bill that was just introduced on Friday. It's a bit different than the Kavanaugh bill, but I think two are going to be reconciled, probably not in time for passage this session, but I think that will happen in the off-session period. There's also a number of proposals within that bill that could be done administratively, so I think both bills are something worth looking at for the board, particularly as it makes decisions related to ballot design for September, and we're happy to provide input on that. The second bill that we worked on during this session was a Carlucci Kavanaugh bill related to pre-registration for 16-year-olds. It's twice passed the Assembly. Last session it moved forward in the Senate through committee to rules, but did not this year. We support that for a couple of reasons. One, we want to get young people more involved in voting, and so we wanted to see 16-year-olds be able to register. But also, given the changes that the board has made through the DMV, with enabling registration to occur through that process, we think it would take a lot of the administrative burdens off the board with regard to getting young people to vote or to register, as they get their licenses. So I know that the board has not taken positions on those two bills in particular, the Golden ballot design bill and the Carlucci Kavanaugh pre-registration bill, but it would be great if the board could do so going forward in the future for its legislative package. Thank you.
Thank you.
I was a member of that ballot committee. I think it's very useful, and I think the board will save a lot of money if Mr. Ryan could just explain to the other commissioners who aren't part of the committee, so we can fully understand how the board, if we go forward on this review, will use some of the technology. Very briefly, please.
Apparently, I'm getting a reputation.
When you say briefly, what do you mean?
It would allow us to print the ballots as the requests come in from the voters, as opposed to us just getting a number out of the ballots in anticipation of people voting.
All right, as briefly as I'm able to, which I understand doesn't necessarily meet the technical definition of brief. Essentially, there are two main systems, and there may be a third. My understanding of the state OGS contract is that third. If there is a third, it might be dropping off. But in any event, there are two ballot on demand systems out there that I'm aware of. One by Dominion, one by ES&S, that are currently available under the state OGS contract. What that would allow is for, instead of ordering ballots from the vendor, from any vendor, that we would be able to print our own absentee ballots, absentee ballots, in-house, and distribute them upon request. So, we've taken a preliminary look at it, but it would require a more in-depth analysis. There is a higher hardware cost associated with an ES&S acquisition if we were to go that route, and a lower hardware cost with Dominion, but a lower software cost with ES&S and a higher software cost with Dominion. And I think in order to be fair to the commissioners and to the public and everyone concerned with it, that comparison really has to be done in depth. I think what, at least I would request, if this is part of Commissioner Guastella's motion, is that the commissioners vote to explore the acquisition of a system and give the executive management the task to, put together an appropriate and full evaluation, a side-by-side comparison of the two systems and what the potential costs would be of acquisition versus the immediate savings and then the out-year savings in print reduction. I think the potential is there to substantially reduce the consumables.
Prints and what we send out.
Well, for one election, a rough estimate would be about 1.1 million ballots ordered, 330 some ballots of that 1.1 million being test ballots versus, in a low end, 65 or 70,000 actual absentee ballots distributed. So, automatically off the top, we're talking about, a substantial reduction in paper. But again, this is not a, rush to the plate and, grab a bat and swing. This is it's a big deal, and it's quite a substantial bit of capital money being outlaid. But the potential savings over the course of time, if the board was to adopt either one of the two systems is there, but I think it requires an in-depth analysis.
Commissioner Ray?
Yeah, is the concept to have the printability of these ballots be done at the borough offices, or is that process going to get moved here to be able to utilize the print shop that we have
Right.
here?
No, this isn't print shop stuff. This would be acquiring a system to print, and the rough outline would be each borough would have at least 2 printers, and then a couple of 2, 3 printers here in reserve, either to replace a machine that goes down. It'll provide us the option for the boroughs to print their own absentees and distribute them as the requests come in. But what it also will do over the course of time as a back-end process, in the event that we hit another situation like a Superstorm Sandy situation, we'll then have, call it roughly, I know people like to hop on numbers, but roughly 15 of these machines available to print ballots in an emergency basis as well. But again, this is, I've done a preliminary review. Contracts are available for comparison on the OGS website, the state OGS website. Also, the specifications of each system's capability is available on the federal EAC website. I've looked at that information preliminarily, and there are pluses and minuses from a financial perspective with respect to both systems, and there are pluses and potential minuses with respect to both systems from an operational perspective. So the concept in general, that all I'm asking for, and I can't speak for the commissioners, is conceptually, is this something that we want to pursue? And if it is conceptually something we want to pursue, then the executive management will put together information in greater detail for the commissioners to consider and to receive public commentary on as well moving forward.
Is there any thought about, well, I guess we haven't taken the baby step, but the giant leap for mankind would be ultimately doing our own printing of all the ballots, and then hopefully being able to do the setup at some point ourselves, so that we don't have to incur the real significant printing costs that the whichever company we go with imposes upon us.
Well, I mean, as I would see it, having not taken this, a step further down the road, this would be a good first step in that direction to deal with the smaller universe of ballots, being the absentees, the militaries, the overseas, those. See how we deal with them, determine what the logistical difficulties would be, keeping in mind that our present printing contract is not just a printing contract. There is service elements to it as well, including dividing and doing delivery by zone and breaking packets up by ED and AD. And there's quite a significant amount of work that's done on the back end of the process by the print vendor, understanding that whole process is in the early stages of being overhauled as the new RFP went out, and we expect that's going to change a little bit, or maybe substantially, in 2015, based on our available options. So I think this provides us with an opportunity, at least in potential, to control that which we can control in the short term, while we're looking at a longer term vision in terms of overall cost savings of Ballot.
Commissioner Shimon.
Is there any reason your commentary here is limited to the two vendors, ES&S and Dominion? Is there any reason contractually or otherwise why we can't open it up to any vendor who can perhaps fulfill a request for the concept of ballot printing on demand, and not necessarily for these two systems?
The reason that I limited it to ES&S and Dominion is those are the only two, and I'm not saying that the only ones on OGS, but as we're sitting here today, those are the only two vendors that I'm aware of that are on the state OGS contract for this type of system. Now, the purpose of limiting it to that is, if there's a third or fourth vendor, I'll certainly bring that back in my analysis. My plan is to do a full analysis. But limiting it to that, those are, if it's only those two, they're the only two state certified systems. So we are overseen by the State Board of Elections, and if there are more than two certified systems, certainly I'll bring back, 3 or 4 vendors to the commission. But right now, however many state certified systems there are, we're limited to those. And then, if they're already on an OGS contract, it's kind of counterintuitive to issue another RFP, to have our own negotiating process when the negotiation has already been done by OGS, and it would run counter as well to the executive order by the governor that allows for us to piggyback, or not only us, but any governmental entity can piggyback off of another previously negotiated contract to streamline the procurement process. So from a streamlined perspective, it's best to stick with OGS, but from a state certification perspective, we're limited to those systems that are state certified.
Commissioner Rogers.
If the commissioners do decide that you should go forward, how much time do you need before you report back to us?
I would say it's pretty complex. I would say at least 30 days. Sometime during the middle toward the end of the summer. I mean, we have an election coming up, and I want to make sure that we do a complete job and we dot all the i's and cross all the t's, because it's, even from my preliminary analysis, there are technical specifications that are listed, and you want to be able to compare what you're talking about. I mean, the fact that I have a machine and you have a machine doesn't mean our machines do the same exact thing, and that's clear to me. And I won't say which way it's going for the purposes of this preliminary conversation, but for example, one of the machines has an output of 130 pages a minute that I've seen, and one has 300. But then the question becomes, all right, well, is one more reliable than the other? I mean, so if the 130-page machine doesn't break down, but the 300-page machine does break down, I mean, these are the kinds of things you want to take a look at before you go ahead and make a full-blown recommendation to the commissioners and say, we should go this way or that way.
And the machines do something other than just ballots on demand, right? We're going to use them for something else as well?
Well, there's more than one element to it. There's the element of printing the ballots on the, and then there's the scanning. So there's more than one machine. So you got the ballots that, the machines that print the ballots, and then you have the high-speed scanners that count them. Keeping in mind that our present teamwork system is out of warranty. So we're in a position where we have to start looking to the future anyway, irrespective of which vendor is ultimately chosen. We're starting to get to the point where the current teamwork system is exceeding its useful life cycle. And I know that there's been some issues with the old machines and some of the scanner portion of the system. In at least one borough, I know there was an issue last election cycle that we had to deal with.
So that's what I'm saying, what is clarifying is that not only is this ballot on demand, it also will help us with our scanning, because our scanners currently in the 5 boroughs are out of warranty, so we have to start replacing them.
The teamworks ones, which are dealing with the absentee ballots. Right, the central counters.
The central counters
Right.
are out of warranty, and we start have to replace them anyway.
Right, we're on a pay-as-you-go situation right now. So if they break, we pay for service. They get them fixed.
So can we have a tech class over time? Yes.
Does the technology exist to use these at poll sites machines, I guess, or do any other jurisdiction across the country use any technology such as this, like on election day? Is that something we'd be looking to do sometime in the
I've heard
future?
California does that.
Right.
Yes.
The technology exists to use them at poll sites, but you would be then saying, basically timesing our cost by 1,000. Because we could say we're going to order 13 to 15, of these machines, 2 for each borough and then a few reserves, versus having enough to deploy and set up at 1,300 poll sites. So you'd be basically timesing your cost, through the roof. It would be perhaps doable if you were saying, all right, in addition to, take a borough as large as Brooklyn, in addition to the central office, we're gonna put one, at a location for ease of delivery, in a borough, and do a few extra. But I think it certainly would be cost prohibitive based on my initial look at the numbers to do a full poll site implementation.
Yeah,
Plus, it would feed into Commissioner Humane's concern of ballot, people doing nefarious things with ballots and polls. Not that you're skeptical.
It does exist.
California has 17 different. This would be a good first step to just see how it works. Okay.
I would also hate to have to put the additional burden on our poll workers to start. It's hard enough to get them to send the people to the right pew in the right church, to then have them print out the right ballot, at least at our level of training and level of staffing.
Mr. Martin?
I just had two questions on Mr. Ryan's proposal. One, if the board was to go forward with purchasing the machines to print ballots for absentee voters, military voters, overseas voters, would there be any distinguishable difference from the voter's perspective in terms of what the ballot would look like, or is it exactly the same as if printed by an outside entity?
The way I understand it from the subcommittee meeting was that it would be the exact same ballot that we give out now.
So they're effectively not even.
Which is different from the actual
Right.
poll site ballot, but it would be the same as how absentee ballot.
And then the second question I had is, if the board was to go ahead and purchase machines for this purpose, can they then use the same machines for the poll sites later on if it made that choice and it's just about buying more, or would you have to get a different machine and then these would no longer essentially be useful?
I think it's a different machine all around. I think this is just really for the absentee, and the size of that machine, I don't know if you ever had a chance to
I think
go to
that's
the
something
boroughs and look
that
at those actual scanners, they're huge.
No, well, it goes into that depends category, right? It depends on which ultimately, and I really don't want to get into this question publicly, it really would depend on the vendor that's chosen, and I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thanks.
All right, and it's not a question of capability, it's not a question of technological capability, it's a question of compatibility. So it really is part of the whole question, and ultimately which vendor is chosen will also play into
Following actions were taken in executive session. First is that Art Haggerty was hired as the Queen's clerk, effective as of June 29, 2014. as the
Deputy Chief.
Deputy Chief at the outgoing salary of his predecessor. Kristen Strandberg, who was a temporary employee in Staten Island, was transferred from the Staten Island office to Manhattan as a trainer assistant. The 3 voting machine technician vacancies in Manhattan were filled by the hire of Luval Taylor, Anthony Jameson, and Dante Powell at the salary of their predecessors. Robert Scott was currently a temporary employee in the Manhattan office, was hired to fill the administrative assistant vacancy created by Gene Burton's departure from the board at the incumbent rate of salary. William Badger Rodriguez, who's currently a clerk, was elevated to the administrative assistant's position formerly held by James Nelson at the incumbent rate held by Mr. Nelson. Tricia Fernandez was hired to fill the clerk position created by the vacancy of William Badger Rodriguez at the rate of the predecessor, at the outgoing rate. And we are move to adjourn. Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Dent has a motion. Well, we need all the commissioners to actually take their seats. No, we're ready for you to take a seat. Commissioner Dent has a motion.
Did anyone leave?
Commissioner Rogers.
I'm here.
Commissioner Dent, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. In the Brooklyn office, we have vacancies that I would like to fill. As we know, James Howard, he retired, and effective June 1st, 2014, Daniel Ortiz will fill that position at the outgoing salary. Joel Ortiz, and they're not related. He will be promoted to the administrative assistant at the outgoing salary of Brenda Johnson, who retired. I'm sorry, she didn't retire, she resigned. And then Tobias Russo, he will then fill the position that Joe Ortiz was holding at the salary of $37,000, and that will be effective June 29th, 2014. Bear with me, please.
Take your time.
Thank you, Mr. President. And there should be one more position. Okay. And that will be Daniela Sherman, and she will be filling the position as the, as a clerk. at the outgoing salary. The position that we are holding would be the position for the deputy chief until further notice.
Anybody second it? All in favor? Any opposed or abstained? Motion carries. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
We are adjourned till July 1st at 1:30 p.m. We are going to start at 1:30 whether Mr. Lyon is here or not. And good luck to everybody on Election Tuesday.
Do you have a secret? I feel like